Welcome to the SWIKE Podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SWIKE Podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here with one of our guest mentors, Deron Fung, who comes to us with a different background where he's was both an accountant and and is currently a lawyer. And we'll get into kind of his background and his backstory. So, Deron, why don't you start off by telling us what you're doing right now?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me, Lucky. So I'm currently a corporate lawyer working in private practice at a firm in Toronto. And I mainly do two types of work. I have a capital markets practice. So I help public companies sell debt and equity securities in public and private settings. Public and private offerings. And I also do mergers and acquisitions as well. So that's basically my practice at my law firm right now.
That's awesome. And what I love to do is kind of dig into kind of the backstory. So if you can tell us what was Deron like as a kid, like growing up? Was he outgoing, shy? Did he always want to become a lawyer, or I guess the accountant initially? So what were you like growing up, and what were some of the influences that you had along the way?
Yeah, I think as a kid, I was generally quite outgoing, meaning that I talked a lot. But I was also quite, in some ways, also quite introverted.
Okay.
I actually was quite a studious kid, I think. And I like to read. I didn't mind doing homework, which was quite weird of me. But yeah, I guess I was a good student, I think, in terms of being able to focus on my work and keep myself motivated then. But yeah, I didn't purposely mean it that way, but I think I just ended up being a bit more studious than usual. So cool. I guess I was a good kid, hopefully. Maybe my mom has something different to say.
Cool. Well, we might ask her later on. No, I'm just kidding. Do you have like any siblings or cousins that might have kind of influenced you along the way?
Yeah, I had a lot of cousins actually in the accounting world.
Okay.
In particular, I would say one of my aunts was probably the most influential in terms of my career early on. She was an accountant who practiced in Canada for a number of years, went to Hong Kong and continued there and was quite successful. Yeah. She worked in audit and then later on started her own consulting practice. And she did financial advisory work, audit, accounting compilations, all sorts of things. And she was what kind of influenced me to look into going into accounting as a career. And she explained it to me as, well, accounting is basically a language of business people. Okay. And so it was a great starting point, no matter where you ended, to have that foundation in the business world. And that's what got me interested in accounting to start with.
Cool.
So my aunt was very influential in the beginning of my career, actually.
And when did that start? Was that more kind of at a grade school level? Because I don't know how early on you had contact with your aunt, and did it like at that point you automatically knew you were going to become an accountant, or were there also influences from like mom and dad or other folks that also said and pointed you to the accounting direction, or something that pulled you away from it? Was there any other options along the way?
Yeah, I think my aunt would have been an influence mainly in my high school days.
Okay.
And I think my parents were also indirectly influenced as well, because my parents saw that my aunt was doing so well and that, she built her own business and her starting point was also in accounting. And so I think between my parents and my aunt, they sort of kind of influenced me into business / accounting. And then it also made sense to me. I mean, I get that, accounting is just so fundamental in the business world that I also thought it would have been a good foundation for whatever I decided to do in the future. So yeah, cool. They were important influences early on.
That's awesome. So in your high school days, then was it always kind of a single track to get into accounting, or did you also explore like some of the sciences or something? Because like typically the Asian upbringing is doctor, engineer,
Yeah.
accountant, lawyer, and so you hit two out of the four, which is pretty good. But did you ever explore kind of the other side of it, or is it no? I mean, I see a great path here, so I'm just going to stick with accounting.
I think really, to be honest, early on, I was struggling between whether or not to go into engineering or
Okay.
accounting. Very like mathy sort of careers, you could certainly say. And so I took a lot of the math courses in high school, a lot of like the physics, chemistry, biology, the usual sciences.
Right.
And I think I learned from high school that I just wasn't very good at the sciences. Like I just had no natural like it just I didn't pick it up easily.
Okay.
And I found that although I was actually okay in math, I sort of struggled in the sciences. And so I ended up thinking, oh, maybe, maybe engineering isn't the best choice for me. And actually at that point, I realized that I was much better in the maths, but also in the language department. I
Okay.
think I quite excelled in my English and literature courses. And so I was sort of more divided then whether or not to go into more a linguistic sort of career
Okay.
or a more math-based sort of career. So I think maybe now that I think about it, it does sort of make sense that I had that inclination to either go into accounting or law in the end. And I guess I ended up doing a bit of both, but it sort of makes sense now that I think back to it, and now that you kind of make me reflect.
That sounds good. And out of the group of friends that you had in, I guess, earlier in high school, right? Were they kind of mathy and sciencey as well, which kind of pulled you in that direction, or were they more on the like language, business, or math side, or were there influences in that side?
Yeah, I would say most of my friends. So just for context, I went to school at St. Rob's in
Okay.
Markham, and I think that area is predominantly quite Asian, I would say.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So a lot of the people came from a similar upbringing where math based or sciencey jobs, careers that was preferred. And I actually didn't know a lot of Asian lawyers growing up, so I
Okay.
didn't. That wasn't generally on the radar. So my influence within my friend group was to go more towards the mathy, the science, the business side. And I guess that also pushed me to do accounting first, and I guess that does make a lot of sense now, because a lot of my friends ended up doing business school with, so that was great.
Cool. And then how did you, I guess, make that decision of which university to go to? Because I would imagine there's a lot of competition to get into kind of the top schools and things like that. Like accounting is one where it's highly regarded in the Asian circles.
Yeah.
So yeah, what was the decision like to kind of pick a school? I know you did co-op. Was that a big factor in the decision, or what other things could folks look at in order to make a decision to go to a university or not?
Yeah. So quite personally, I knew that in the back of my mind, I very likely would have wanted to pursue law school after my undergrad, and
Okay.
I needed undergrad to go to law school anyway. So in the back of my mind, I needed a school that hopefully wasn't a program that wasn't too hard, I have to say, because I knew I needed the marks to get into law school. Second of all, I needed something fast. I didn't want to spend so much time in an undergrad program that would be very long, and then start my second career later in life, too late in life, I guess. So I wanted a program that was also fast. And then I also wanted a program that would give me some work experience. And somehow I found that the U of T Scarborough co-op program was just very flexible, and it just really met that timeline that I was looking for. And so I picked U of T Scarborough because it had the co-op. It gave me the work experience. And I was actually able to shrink the program a bit. I started in September 2009 and I finished in December 2012. So I was able to compress it as well into like 3.5 years. So that was also one of the considerations I had at the time. And so it worked out, and I was able to graduate a little earlier and start this whole CPA exam process a little earlier. And then that helped me along the way to try to get into law school as quickly as possible. So that was sort of the thinking I had at the time. But I sort of see that was probably a bit more personal in my circumstances, for sure.
Sure. So actually, you had the understanding that you wanted to get into law even before you went into undergrad. So, yeah, how did that influence come in, right? So you were influenced by your aunt to go into accounting, which made a whole bunch of sense. And how did the law influence come about?
Yeah, I don't know now exactly where it came about. I think there was a time where I started to realize I was struggling in the sciences, and I wasn't sure if I wanted a career in maybe a very mathy sort of role. And so I started to think, well, what else could I do? And I guess what I was good at I was relatively good at was more on the language side. And so I was thinking, oh, maybe a career in law would also be fitting for me. And so I started to take more and more English and literature courses in high school. And, I really enjoyed it. And I think from there, and also for context, I have a very strong, big interest in like politics. I watched a lot of news as a kid. I could probably like list out all the MPs, all the cabinet ministers at the time. It's so nerdy of me, but that was just what I was interested in as a kid. And so I think between my relatively stronger side being my linguistic side and my interest in politics, that sort of planted the seed to think about law as a potential career when I was younger.
That's interesting, because I haven't heard too many kids that know all the cabinet ministers and things like that. So maybe we'll dive into that in future discussion. But I'd want to talk a little bit. Okay, so you are going into accounting because it's the language of business. So it's always a good foundation for anything. And then you really have law in kind of your sights. That's kind of the ultimate goal. But what was the thought process to kind of condense the program? Because you did it in a shorter amount, but even with a co-op too. So that's even harder. So how many courses did you take in a single term, or like how did you manage to condense it?
I sort of took a shortcut. I didn't exactly finish the co-op program. Okay. So I think traditionally you would do 8 study terms and 3 co-op terms. But I asked if I could cancel my last co-op term and just work earlier. And they were very accommodating and they let me move it around. So I ended up just not doing 1 co-op term and graduating a semester early. And that helped me write my first CA exam, which was in January. CKE is in January of each year. So if I was able to graduate just before January, then I would be eligible to write the January CKE. Well, that's the old program, right? And so that helped me fast track my CA exams.
Cool.
But unfortunately, I didn't end up writing with my friends, so I guess that was not so great. So anyway, different story.
You had to study on your own and figure it out on your own. But yeah, what was the process like to grab, I guess, your first co-op term, or did you have any like previous work experience before you did any of your co-op terms?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I did not have any work experience before co-op. I worked 2 weeks at a summer camp and that was it. Like I couldn't even stand the summer camp I worked at. And so I left after 2 weeks. And I was very concerned when I was starting university. And I was thinking in the back of my mind, well, I don't have any work experience. This is my first, I'm looking for first job as a co-op, how is it possible that anyone would trust me to do any professional job? So I thought that was my thinking. I was very worried during the whole recruitment process, but luckily it worked out. Like I ended up working at Deloitte and in the audit practice, and it was just a great experience. And I think what it took was just someone at the time. I really thought that I think someone just believed in me, and they thought they had confidence that, based on maybe my academic record, that I would do well in the work experience. But I really think that someone really just took a leap of faith, because I didn't have any work experience and I have not proved myself in any professional setting. So to me, that was really a key milestone for me. I think like that really, I think you could say in my mind really changed my life, I think.
Cool. So in that process, I guess you were someone with really, really good grades from a university context, and did you just follow
decent grades? I wasn't like I had decent grades, but I was not like the top like 5 person in my class.
Okay.
So
okay. So from that side, then, well, I was just more curious in terms of like, well, did you follow the normal hiring cycle where you just applied online and went through interviews, and then someone just kind of decided to take a chance on you, or were there other factors in play where there might have been other things that kind of contributed to that person selecting you?
Yeah, I did do the regular co-op interview process where you interview with a whole bunch of people and they rank you and you rank them, sort of thing. I definitely went through that, but leading up to it, I was invited to apply for DNLC, the Deloitte National Leadership Conference,
right?
And actually, I didn't know about it at the time. What happened was, it must have been my first year. We were having mock interviews for co-op, and my interviewer was from Deloitte. And they told, after the mock interview, they're like, "Oh, did you hear about DNLC?" I'm like, "Oh no, I didn't. Didn't know anything about it." They said, "Well, it's a conference to learn more about Deloitte and their practice and to get to know the people at the firm. And by the way, there's a kickoff event that night. Like there was the mock interview, and later that day there was the kickoff event. And they said, well, why don't you come with us? Do you have anything to do? I'm like, well, for sure. Like, why not? And so I went to the kickoff event. I learned more about it. I applied, and that really just started my journey at Deloitte, because I ended up being accepted to the conference. I had a wonderful time, and eventually that naturally segued me to work for the firm.
That's awesome. So yeah, there seemed like that's why I kind of asked about the question about the grades, because if you're just kind of a so-so student, there's usually something else. And for those that don't know what DNLC, it's the Deloitte National Leadership Conference, and most of the big companies have some version of this. And in all honesty, what that often is almost like a recruiting challenge in the sense that they try to pick and choose the brightest and the best, and then whenever you attend it, as much as you're having fun, people are watching and just making sure, okay, this might be this person might be like kind of firm material where it's just an extended interview in all honesty. So take those opportunities in order to showcase what you can do, and of course have some fun during the process. So.
I actually had a great time. As weird it was that you're spending like so many days with the people you don't know and a potential employer, it's kind of a weird dynamic, but it's actually very fun. Like we had a lot of, it was just mostly games and some seminars, and to get to know more about the firm, but also a lot of networking too. A lot of FaceTime with people at the firm who were hiring and had more insight about the practice of accounting and audit and the different service lines and all the great things that accounting firms do. So it was actually very informative, and I guess great for the firm too, because then they have more quality time to get to know you. Because to be honest, an interview is just so short.
Right.
I sometimes question how much you can really get out of it, but the whole week is a different story, right? So yeah.
For sure. It's definitely. It's kind of like dating versus living together. It's
Yeah,
quite a
yeah.
different experience if you put it in the relationships. Spectrum.
Yes. Agreed.
Awesome. So you're shortening your accounting program, and you take your CPA. Now a CPA is not required to become a lawyer, right? So
Yes.
why did you put
True.
yourself out through that rigor, or is that kind of part of the plan anyway?
Uh, I I think I fell into it. I have to say, I the fact that I was already in the co-op program and the work experience that I had accumulated at Deloitte would count towards my experience requirement. It just made, I thought it made a lot of sense that since I've started in the process, I had a job that supported it as well. Like there's all the training that came with being associated with Deloitte and all the great resources that they had. It just made sense for me, I think, to continue on with that. And little did I know, I was quickly wrapped into the whole exam process. And after that was done, I'm like, what the heck? I might as well stay and finish my experience requirement. And so that's really how it came to be. And so, and it also gave me time during my work experience to go write my LSAT and apply for law school. So I mean, I was trying not to waste time too. So while I was working, I made sure I was advancing the other stuff that I was planning ahead.
That's amazing. So it seems like that things were just kind of falling into place. It's like, I'm so close to the finish line. I might as well just go to the end of it because you're 3/4 of the way there. I might as well just finish it off. But in the back of your mind, it was always law was still there. The SATs or the LSATs were being written. How was that experience? Are there any kind of thoughts in terms of how it compares to like studying for your CPA exams and stuff like that?
Very different, I have to say. It was very, it's just a different part of your mind. And frankly, I think I'm a lot better. My mind is more set up maybe for the business side and accounting side than in the more linguistic side in the end. Maybe because I spent 4 years in business school. I worked for a few years. I became trained to be more of a business person than a pure linguist. I certainly did not have the writing skills of someone who did a 4-year English literature undergrad. Like that was just not me. And so switching gears from the CPA world to now having to write my LSATs really challenged me in certainly different ways. For example, the LSATs they have a reading comprehension section.
Okay.
And in order to really do well in that, you actually have to read fast and really comprehend quickly and to be able to pick out the key points. And I mean, that's very much part of just general studying, like whether or not you're in accounting or law, that's an important skill either way. But I found that I just didn't read very fast, and it really affected my ability to do well on the LSAT, and so I personally found that challenging, and I had to one component of the LSAT was the logical reasoning. It's one thing to analyze the CPA handbook, but it's definitely another thing to say, if A then B, if C then D, what happens if it's E? Like in that technical world, I don't think I was trained that way, and I think philosophy students would do immensely well in it based on their training. But because I wasn't trained that way, it was definitely a big learning curve when I was studying for the LSAT, and I have to say I was struggling. Like my first diagnostic exams were not good. and in fact, they were so bad, I thought I would never become a lawyer. Like I thought I would never make it. And I think people don't talk about that, but my scores were just horrendous. And so, I mean, I accepted that. And so I went and looked for, study programs, and there's a lot of them out there. Like they do drills with you. They teach you how to write the LSAT, how to understand what the questions are saying, and there's tips and tricks along the way. And eventually, it just helped me improve a lot. And in the end, it was good enough for me to get in somewhere. So I ended up at Osgood for 3 years.
That's awesome. So how was the I guess selection for law school? Was there like a lot of opportunities and choices, or just kind of like, well, they're the only ones that let me in?
Yeah, I mainly applied in Ontario.
Okay.
I got into most of the schools other than U of T. So like Osgood, York, sorry, that's the same thing. Osgood, Queens, and the Western, that sort of thing. But I think in the end, I picked Osgood because they're situated in Toronto. They have a very close connection with the business law community here. And so I thought it made sense, and I decided to go with Osgood.
Cool.
But different schools are known for different things, and maybe that's a topic for another day. But for example, Queens is better known for criminal law. Western is also known for business law, partly because of their affiliation with Ivy. And then Osgood is a mixed bag. There's a like very big business law community, but there's also a lot in the criminal space, the litigation space, and it's more mixed. It's a larger school. But yeah, it worked out and it made sense for me, I thought.
So now you've got into Osgood and you're starting law school. How was that experience? Was it kind of everything that you expected? Because that was the ultimate goal, getting into law school and then obviously practicing law. But how was the law school experience?
It was very different and actually probably quite stressful at the beginning. I think I really suffered from imposter syndrome at the beginning. I think everyone around you was used to getting like A's in university. And so, I mean, you're just average there. If you had an A, like that was, you're just like everyone else. And so, and the grading system in law school is such that it's very structured. Only the top 15% can get an A, 65% get B's. And then I think the next 20% has to get a C, and there's 5% that gets a D, and then there's a 5% variance somewhere in there.
Sure.
But it's very structured. Like no professor can deviate from this unless they get an exception from the dean, and it almost never happens. So my point being, everyone went from getting used to getting A's in undergrad. Now only 15% of you or 10% of you can get an A now, and it became a struggle because I was starting to see myself getting B's. I'm like, oh crap, like this is really bad. And B's, B pluses, some A minuses, some A's, but more B's than I'm comfortable with at the time. And so yeah, it was a bit of struggle getting comfortable with that different grading scale, and frankly also just in business school, you might read a chapter a week, and you do there's some math courses. There's a good mix of subjects, but in law school, it's all reading. Like the books are like not even exaggerating, like Bibles, and the paper is like Bible paper thin. Very intimidating for someone who's not used to reading so much, but you get used to it. I think after my first year, I just, I got used to reading a lot. It's just an adjustment, I think. So
Sounds good, because you had that more mathematical background, so you weren't really kind of trained to learn the same way. And you talked about how you didn't really read as much as someone with philosophy backgrounds who are used to reading quickly. So this was a transition. So talk to us a little bit about the experience in getting the I guess first job as a lawyer, right? So you have some CPA background. Did you have like a co-op term in law school, or is there's articling or something? I don't know all the terms.
It's a very similar process actually. There's a summer internship in your second year, and similar to the accounting world, you apply in the fall and then you interview, and then you go into your first summer job if you get one. It's just that the process is a little crazy because the Law Society actually regulates when law firms can hire and approach candidates.
Right.
And so there's only specified periods of times in a year where they can actually coordinate that process. So in Ontario, for your first summer job, there's a period called OCI is called on-campus interviews. And basically you apply for maybe like 40 jobs. Hopefully someone will get back to you. And then over 2 days, you'll have all your interviews. And so I had 20 interviews in 2 days.
Whoa.
Which was crazy. So they're like 20-minute things. So imagine in a library, a huge library, they set up stalls. There's partitions between each stall, and in each stall, there's one law firm with 2 recruiters. And all the candidates are in a holding room. And every 20 minutes, they'll ring a bell. You go out to your first scheduled interview. You talk to them for 17 minutes. They ring a second bell and you have to go back. And then in 3 minutes, they ring another bell again. And then you go back out to your other interview. And it's like a speed dating process over 2 days.
And do you even get any lunch or anything, or any breaks, or is it literally 20 back-to-back or 10 back-to-back in a day?
There's depending on your schedule, because everyone's schedule is a bit different based on the interviews you got. There is lunch, but sometimes you might have 3 or 4 back to back, and it's pretty crazy. Yeah, and then after that process, if you get an invitation to an in-firm interview, which is the second step in the process, then there's a week where you will meet with firms, and you'll meet with them on day. It's a 3-day process. You'll meet with them on day 1. You'll have dinner with them or lunch with them one day. You'll have a second interview, and then on the 3rd day, by then you'll probably know if you're getting a job. So,
right, but you'll still go through all 3 days. So let's say you bomb the first interview, you'll still go through the 3 days.
They have to interview. They have to invite you back. So at the end of each day, you'll find out who you get interviewed with again next day. But they're very long. Like they're like one interview with a firm would be like a 2-hour time slot. Okay. And it basically they sit you in a room and maybe with one interviewer, and every 10 to 15 minutes someone will come in, and then they'll add until there's 3 people, and then one will come out, and then next person will come in, and one person will come, and it goes on for about an hour or an hour and a half. So you'll see a lot of people within that time.
Sure. And are these like behavioral questions? Are they like technical questions from a law perspective, or like what sort of questions would they have? Or well, actually, you know what? Maybe we'll save that for a future discussion.
Actually, I have to say that's a good question, because they're very they're actually they're not technical questions, and they're not generally behavioral questions. They're more about like your background. I think they're trying to more get a sense of your soft skills. And on the technical side, they're only looking at your marks. It's very different from an accounting interview where it's very behavioral based. Mm-hmm. And in some cases, you might say that's a bit more, based on merit, maybe based on real skills, but like the law interview process is not like that. It's very just soft skill based, and how you interact with the interviewer is very different.
Cool. So you got through the process, and then you get an offer, and now you're an articling student. Is that what happens, or?
Yeah, and the first step is you're a summer student. And your second year, and then typically they hire you back to article after you graduate, and you'll article for 1 year, and then after articling, then you'll have to be hired back into one department. And most people get a job, but sometimes things happen. But yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. And when you go through the process, do you pick like the type of law? Because law firm has many different departments. So you said that you focus on the corporate side, but corporate still has multiple different areas as well. How do you or they choose for you, or do you choose, or how does that process happen?
That's actually a very weird process. It's a two-way thing. So when you interview, you sort of express interest in the sorts of areas of the law that you want to work in.
Cool.
And for context, the firm is split into maybe 18 departments, 18 to 20 departments. There's corporate, but then there's technology, pensions, there's employment, there's litigation, there's intellectual property. There's many types of different services that our firm does. And most people won't know what they want to do specifically, because honestly, I don't know who's interested in pensions law to out of the gate. Like, that's so specific. Right. So I don't really know. But generally we rotate into different areas based on our interest. So if I know I'm more interested in transactional side, I rotated through our banking group, which is the lending department. And then I then rotated through corporate, which is more of the M&A, your debt and equity issuances of securities, that sort of thing.
Right.
But then someone who is more interested in litigation would probably rotate through obviously litigation, but also maybe the construction department, which sees a lot of litigation, maybe the data privacy department, which also sees a lot of litigation. So it depends on your interest areas, and you pick. They try to, organize it for you so that you rotate through what you want.
Right.
And then in the end, it's sort of, there is like a bit of a matchmaking process where they rank the people. The department ranks who they want. You rank who you want, which departments you want, and they try to match it.
Right. It's kind of like that co-op hiring process all over again, but in law, right? So who matches with who, that sort of thing.
It's weird because you already work there, but you still need to find a job, sort of.
Right.
In a department, you need to land somewhere. So it was kind of stressful then too.
Yeah. So it's possible that no one matches. Is that a possibility, or you could always get your bottom match or something?
It's possible that there's no match, and but at a larger firm, it's rare.
Yeah.
Usually they'll give you your second choice if necessary. But in a more medium-sized firm, it's oftentimes they might only hire 6 out of 10, like 60% of that class back, because they might be picking just the best of their group. But a larger firm might keep more, maybe 95%. Maybe there's one person who doesn't come back, but generally you will.
Cool. So if you could go back and give young Deron some advice, maybe just like a Post-it note with a few words of wisdom in whatever, high school or university or in law school, or like kind of those key areas where you were probably most stressed or most challenged. What are some of the SWIKE, the stuff I wish I knew earlier that you would share?
I think after going through so many licensing processes and just applying for schools and applying for jobs, I think I just worried too much. I wish I didn't worry so much. It's not that I'm overly confident in what I can get, but it's more like I think there's only so much you can control. And I think I had to learn to say that, I tried my best, and whatever happens, happens. And I think that would have made my life much less stressful. But I didn't learn this until much later on into my career. I think I waste too much time thinking, oh, what if I don't get this job? What if I don't get into law school? What if, I don't do well in that course? But it's not constructive. I think that time wasted on thinking of the what ifs was just not helpful, and I couldn't do anything about it. And so if there's one thing I could have done better, I think I wish I known, was maybe just focus on the task at hand. Try your best, and you just have to let go. Like, there's just, things are what they are. So.
Right. No, I think that's great wisdom, and it's echoed a lot by a lot of folks, but I think it's one of those things that's easier said after the fact than in the moment, right? So,
Very true.
Are there any things that you've come across that if you were able to kind of share, I don't know, a tip or trick or something really practical that like, hey, do this and that'll help you not worry so much? Do you have anything like that you could share?
Um, I think what was helpful for me is to set goals. I
Okay.
think I naturally maybe a bit more. I like to plan ahead, and maybe that's the issue with the what if. That's why I spiraled out maybe a bit at times. But I like planning ahead, and I think having goals help me have some predictability in my life maybe. So
Okay.
when I was going through school, I set a goal. I know I need this mark maybe to get into law school. So I was always targeting maybe a certain mark, and then I would also schedule my courses so that maybe it would make my workload more manageable to make that target. So I was trying to be strategic about having a mix of easy courses and hard courses, for example, in one semester. And then maybe going forward later in my licensing career, period through the CPA exams, I was more concerned with the timing of things. Like, when do I have to write an exam to apply for law school in time, and then to write the LSAT in time and stuff like that. I think I spent a lot of time planning so that I wouldn't be scrambling last minute. And for me, that gave me a lot of comfort.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not to a lot of people. I think everyone is different in that regard. But
Yeah.
I think the planning piece for me was helpful.
Okay. Yeah, so for if you're that organized type that needs the predictability and know what's upcoming, then make sure you take that extra time to plan. Can be helpful. So yeah, I think that's great advice. And I guess I'd love to have you back for deep dives into things like more on accounting and law and even politics. It sounds like that might be an interesting.
Yeah.
About. But what are some of the future aspirations or things upcoming? And if folks are and you're willing to connect with folks, where could folks connect with you?
Yeah, I think future aspirations. I don't know yet. Actually, I sometimes wonder if I'll stay in law. It's just so interesting and very technical. I love that aspect of it. But I also sometimes miss the business side of things. I sometimes wonder if maybe down the road I'll want some more of a blended role, a more business and legal role. And so I think I maybe aspire to something more in between. That would be great down the road. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out. I can be found on LinkedIn easily. And yeah, feel free to reach out, and certainly would love to speak with more people who are thinking of the same path. And certainly at the time I had my cousin help me too. I have a cousin who's a lawyer. I have one cousin who's a lawyer, and he was pretty helpful, really quite instrumental for me getting through the process. So happy to help others who are thinking the same thing.
Cool. So you had a lot of familial help, aunt and cousins and stuff that kind of, one helps you get to accounting, one helps you get to law. So
that's right.
Helps. So awesome. So thanks so much, Deron, for sharing your story and a little bit of insights and the SWIKE, the stuff you wish you knew earlier. And hopefully we'll have you back for another episode.
Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us on the SWIKE, Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Lukidanu, Lukidanu, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.